we are now. Well, good evening, everybody. All right, sorry about that. We seem to be having a few technology issues, but I think we are up and running. And my name is Paige. Welcome to our first episode of the Thesis series in 2020. I'll be moderating this evening's discussion. Now, for those of you who don't know and who are new to Teach to Reach, we are a group of have cut with teachers and parents, learners, as well as anybody in the education policy experts and the like, to share information and English as much as possible. Teach to Reach is purposefully diverse. From a different age group, different genders, religions, cultures, you name it. And the whole point is that we're being a source of education against www.teachtoreach.co.za. The idea of the series is to create studies. Now, any composed, the challenge studies are never exposed, and they're never given the chance to be explained in layman's terms. And this is the idea behind the thesis series, is to really give a platform to our postgraduate students to express themselves and to express their studies in ways that can actually benefit society. So all the studies that we will be unpacking over the next few months are valuable sources of information to every South African. And the goal is to unpack these studies in a logical and a coherent way. One quick note is that all of our postgraduate students have already passed, have already finalized their research, and their research has been ethically of Sibeko. He is our first presenter, so I'm very excited to welcome him. If the completed his Master of Arts degree in 2018. His master's is focused on community work, and the title of his master in, and he's a research consultant and academic content creator. Now, the format for this evening is very simple and will be as follows. Firstly, Gift will have the opportunity to present his research to us. I'll ask a few questions, and Gift will respond. And if there is anybody listening right now, you're welcome to ask questions throughout on Facebook, and those will show up on my side, and I will pose them to Gift as well. Now, the webinar is scheduled for 1 hour and 30 minutes, and we want to try and stick to that as much as possible. We know that people have lots of things to do on their Saturday evening, and so we don't want to Now, I am aware that we are hosting an online live session, so please forgive us if there are some technical issues. That it works out okay. If there are some technical issues, we'll try our best to sort them out as soon as possible. Right, so with that being said, Gift, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Maybe you'd just like to quickly introduce us. I know I did introduce you, but something that I haven't maybe said about you in your introduction, and then you're welcome to kick us off.
Hi everyone. So hi Paige, how are you? So we actually struggling with our connection here. I can hardly hear you. Evening to everyone abroad, beyond the borders. My name is Sifiso Gift Sibeko. I hail from Kwazulu-Natal in a small town called Pongola. I've been working as a teacher in Umkhanyakude, where my research is based. Yeah. Can you hear me, Paige? Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good so far. All good so far. You go for it.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, so my research primarily it focused on experiences of learners who are orphans and vulnerable children. So it was conducted in Umkhanyakude District in the deep rural areas of Kwazulu-Natal. So I'm not used to this, but I will try by all means to just unpack everything. Okay, so it's titled The Experiences of Primary School Educators Supporting Learners Who Are HIV and AIDS Orphans and Vulnerable Children at Umkhanyakude. I actually did this study as part of my master's requirements that I did in community work. So I'll just go straight to literature. The background and the summary of my literature. Over the last 3 decades, it's about 35 million people have died of AIDS all over the world. As a result, it has brought some negative consequences in terms of reduction of human capital, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa. Findings by Zinyemba, Palvov, and Krug 2019. So in 2005, 13 million children younger than 15 years of age have lost one or both parents due to HIV and AIDS, with the number that was expected to rise up to 25 million in 2010. So this research was conducted by UNICEF 2005, right? So fast track to 2011, 2.1 million children were orphaned as a result of HIV and AIDS death in South Africa. So this came through the national census that was conducted in 2011. Fast track to 2012, the Eastern Cape province has had second highest number of orphans in South Africa with 26%, while KwaZulu-Natal, where our study is focusing, we had actually about 27%. It's a study conducted by Matches and Hall 2012. Right, okay. So first track to our study, Umkhanyakude is said to be the most vulnerable area with high number of children affected by HIV and AIDS pandemic, where my study was situated. So often children who lived in poverty have a lot of have lost parents due to HIV and AIDS illnesses, are more likely to have a decreased coping mechanism. Now, so this situation whereby they live in poverty. So Umkhanyakude, it's known to be, you see it in the map, it's known to be one of the nodal points where there's high rate of HIV and AIDS infection, and a lot of children who live there, they live in destitute condition. So HIV-infected children mainly may miss school days due to illnesses, because some have medical appointments, and often may face financial problems and lack motivation to come to their school. So all those situations that we have explored in literature with my dear colleagues respectively, that the issue of HIV and AIDS in schools, especially in the poor schools, the poor communities, has obviously brought some negative consequences in the schooling system itself. Right. So just to sum up the literature summary, the prevalence of HIV and AIDS epidemic in the lives of people globally has negative ramification in the social aspect of human nature, especially the education sector. We cannot just exclude it, but it's part of it. So the legacy of HIV and AIDS in the poor communities, the whole world, has brought some challenges and difficulties in the schooling system itself. So it has have some interruptions in terms of teaching and learning. So it has cost the government a lot in terms of fighting the negative consequences. So these results were produced by Wood 2013. That was just a snapshot of my literature. Let's just go through to the rationale, why the study was conducted. The purpose was to explore the experiences of primary school educators supporting learners who are HIV/AIDS orphans and vulnerable children in Umkhanyakude District. So the district itself, it is, I've said, it's among the area or the nodal places where there's high rate of infection. So KwaZulu-Natal itself has the highest number of orphans. So when we just go straight to look at the, can you see my slide page? Is it clear?
Yeah, all good. Yeah, it's clear, very clear.
Okay. Let me just move on to the motivation. So why did I choose to do this? Remember, I work as a teacher in those communities. I cannot reveal the name of the community in the school, but what I've experienced that, you know, there are a lot of learners in coming to school with those problems. So at face value, you are unable to deal about those different challenges and difficulties. So it needs a closer look, right? Going back to the motivation in literature, there is a growing literature in the subject of HIV and AIDS and orphans, but there's limited research that is conducted in rural areas, especially of KwaZulu-Natal, where there's high number of orphans. So one of the motivation, I had to go close to them to explore the problems in school, to reveal what really are the attributes of the high rates of learner. For instance, what are the causes rather of poor academic performance? There's a lack of pastoral care at home. These factors has, together fueled me as a researcher to conduct the study. So what I've observed is that there's a high number of school-going orphans. So it was for me to look at their situation, also to study, what are the consequences on the ground, so that I'll be able to understand, You know, because in some of the areas, you only find that some girls in their first school, grade 8, they drop out, and the boys, they just, you know, went missing after primary school. So we need just to understand the problem in primary school before they go to high school, to make sure that they stay at school until they finish, right? Let's just go to the questions of the study. Number one, the first, what are the difficulties primary school educators experience now with supporting HIV and AIDS orphans and vulnerable children? Number two, what are the existing opportunities in schools when supporting orphans and vulnerable children? Then number three, what are the challenges that educators now face when they are supporting HIV and AIDS orphans and vulnerable children? You know, I want just to bring it to attention that not all schools that we can put them in this category. These are schools where there's high poverty, there's high prevalence of HIV and AIDS orphans and vulnerable children. So when you go to literature, you go to the framework, 2005 framework from DSD, you'll read about the nature. When do we say a child is vulnerable? Is a child where has lost a parent, a child who's neglected, a child who has a lot of challenges psychologically, socially, due to a particular situation. So, but now we focus on HIV and AIDS orphans, right? Okay, so let's just go to the setting of the study, right? I hope you can see the map. The study, it is located, it is the map of South Africa, and then this is the map of KwaZulu-Natal. When you, this is the map of Umkhanyakude, Wanganase, Manguzi, Ngwavuma, Induma, Mbazwane, Mtubatubo, Hluhluwe, St. Lucia. So you start here in Mtubatubo, follows up until this is the entire setting of the study. This is the area that is highly affected by HIV and AIDS in KwaZulu-Natal and in South Africa, where there are a lot of HIV and AIDS orphans. Unfortunately, prior there used to be NGOs, but now there are less NGOs. But we'll look at that later on in the discussion. So here, Umkhanyakude, the north, this is Mozambique. The north of Umkhanyakude is the Mozambique. Then northwest is Swaziland, and then here it's Zululand district. And down here in the south, it's your King Cetshwayo. It used to be called Uthungulu. So you can see now that Umkhanyakude is surrounded by different borders, of which people coming from Mozambique, they come here. Swaziland, they come here. Who come from Durban via N2, they come here. Hence, there's a high rate of people being infected by the HIV and AIDS pandemic, right? So, but however, we're not looking at the infection part, but we look at the legacy, the impact of the infection into children, right? Let's just go to the methodology now. So in this study, qualitative research approach was adopted for this study. Due to using this approach, sample was selected through a non-porous sampling technique, which I just purposefully went through literature. Then I discovered those schools. Remember, you cannot just go to any school and find them their high rate of orphans and children, but you go to areas where you know exactly there is subjectively there is a high number of people we are looking for. Then you conducted a study where there's a high prevalence of HIV and AIDS orphans and vulnerable children. So I was guided by the literature, reports from health, report from the municipality, and other documents from the government that told me that there's so much vulnerability in that area. So the focus now was to use an approach that is redressing what has been missing among the areas in terms of support, right? So interviews and focus group were used to collect data from members of the school management teams, and focus groups were also used to facilitate to gather data from class educators, right? So to analyze data from interviews, I've used thematic content analysis, right? So that was the methodology of the study itself. Because of time, we will not go into a lot of things in terms of paradigms, theories, and everything. Just want to discuss the research on the layman language. So we'll just discuss the findings and the method that was used to conduct the research. Okay, right. Okay, so during the discussion in the interview, different themes, they just came based on literature and based on that was in that. The first theme finding was difficulties faced by educators supporting HIV and AIDS orphans and vulnerable children. Right. Remember that now when we're dealing with those social problems, for us to understand the problems and to solve them, we have to overcome the stigma. Right. For some, there is some controversy that why do we have to call those children HIV and AIDS orphans and vulnerable children? If we have data that is empirically collected, published on papers, on theses that tells us that the problem is here, we have to address it as it is so that we're able to find solution. Okay, so during the study, I will be referring to different difficulties, challenges, and opportunities that exist in that area, right? Because the aim is to address the problem, is to provide the support that is needed so that we can able to assist the children for them to cope, to build resiliency, to cope with whatever situations at schools in the community so they're able to stay at school until they're adults. Right. So the first findings of the study were that educators are faced with challenges, you know, such as with difficulties such as the behavior, you know, that is not normal behavior in class, antisocial behavior. Some they become clingy, some they are reserved, some they have anger, negative attitude, stealing. So it means now there is a psychosocial difficulties that they are portrayed by those learners in class, right? Some they seek validation, they just have something that is just special, they need special attention. So these are the difficulties that educators discussed. Some there's a high rate of educational problems like poor reading, they can't attend school normally, they're absent in school, there's a late coming, there's poor classroom participation, right? So another difficulty that was found by this study, that there's a lack of communication between teachers and caregivers at home, right? For instance, it manifests like things like the incomplete documents such as immunization records, birth certificate. Only you find that those learners, they are not normal learners. You're looking for a certificate, you can't find them. You're looking for card and everything, homework is missing, because when they come to school, they come with a lot of challenges, because at home, the family structure has been disturbed by the prevalence or the loss of a parent due to the HIV and AIDS pandemic, right? So then we just going to go to the second finding. What are the opportunities identified by educators now? So during the study, the educators also revealed that there are existing opportunities. For instance, the study found that educators who lost their parents at early ages, you know, who were most likely to be able to identify learners who are HIV and AIDS orphans compared to educators who have never been orphans. So it goes to an extent to our theory of the study, but then I'll try just to unpack it. So those educators who grew up as orphans, then that particular experience has created an opportunity for them to develop a memory box to help them to interpret the situation, to have more natural skills to understand, develop counseling skills, support and emotional comfort during the bereavement session, or whatever type of emotion that come, you know, at school. So in this was a very profound finding, because those educators, not everyone can able to identify learners who struggle with such a situation. If you have lost a parent who are having those psychological problems, but educators who can understand those problems are those who have underwent that situation. So it goes up to an extent of the attachment theory. That sounds very abstract, but I'll try to make it a little bit clear when you go to the.
Can I ask a
along
question?
with the findings? Yes. Hello?
So can you just go back to your previous slide there quickly? The one regarding the teachers.
The opportunities, yes.
Yes, yeah. So were only some teachers finding these issues, or was it something that all the teachers, or because you mentioned something about a special type of teacher? Have you noticed that there was some characteristic in the teacher that made this more identifiable?
Yes, yeah, because you're quite right. So what we discuss when we're discussing in the focus group, educators, they were able to tell themselves, because this is a study that focuses on the experiences, to interpret the situation. That, I was able to identify so and so in my class, because I remember when I was a child, I used to do this after I've lost my parents. When I grow up, so those first-hand experiences of educators who experience the same situation of orphans, they will now become an opportunity for them to be more resilient, to be more relating progressively in terms of the situation itself. So they're able to feel and to provide more psychological support compared to those who never experience. For instance, one of the educators I asked him that, do you have learners in your class who are orphan vulnerable children? And said, no, I don't have learners. But then someone explained. I said, oh, all right, you mean that? Oh, yeah, I can see that, because now it takes experience of previous experience for them to connect with the situation of orphans and vulnerable children. It sounds very abstract, but it's a situation that
no.
Relates to as you
I guess
experience. Yeah, because my study
there was a high level of empathy.
Yes. Because my study, it was based more on the experiences. So when we speak of an experience, something abstract that can be defined and explained by a person at first hand, rather than just being observed and then relate to it. So right, okay. Are you being answered?
It's good. Yeah, perfect. That's brilliant. Thank you for that.
Just move on to the challenges now faced by educators supporting HIV and AIDS orphans. So in my study, like I've said, this study, it is not applicable, for instance, where there is no HIV and AIDS, where there is no high rate of orphans and vulnerable children. It only focuses in areas. For instance, it can be transferred to some areas in Johannesburg, maybe in Cape Town, where there's high rate of orphans. You can go to, for instance, in the Midlands, in KZN, where there's also high. But it was a special psycho support response in the predicaments faced by those learners in communities where there's a high prevalence of orphans and vulnerable children. So these are the challenges that we found. Number one, educators said that there are limited support, right? For instance, they are faced with limited support, things like food, clothes, housing. Remember, some children, they come to school, the way they are dressing, with their physical appearance with torn shoes, old shoes. Some they come just barefooted. Some they come without jerseys. So all those things, schools are not in a good state to provide for them. We understand that we've got sister departments like the DSD, where we can provide a voucher, but in some of the instances, we cannot get an immediate jersey, an immediate trouser, but schools have limited support to take care in terms of food, clothes, housing, because some, they become like even homeless in a situation where you have to find a process for them to allocate home. So there are so many challenges that happens on the ground with those children. However, schools are not well equipped. There's a lack of enough resources such as toiletries, the clothes, sanitary towels, those basic stuff that children need on daily basis for them to be normal at school, to focus, and to be neat and to be clean. So we have found those are the challenges that we are mainly focusing at grounds as educators. So, and educators find it hard to cope with the burden of offense. So what happened? Themselves, educators, they develop what? Occupational stress, because some then are unable to cope. Becomes too much. Maybe in a single class, only find there are 5 kids, and then all those problems come where there is no enough resources, where there's no training, where there's no psychologist. So when you have to deal with those problems time and again, identify as difficulties time and again, educators, they just become stressed because they feel the pain that these learners are feeling. Themselves, they become very vulnerable psychologically. So these are the challenges that we found in the study. Right. The study also discovered that schools are under-resourced to accommodate just kids with special needs. We know that when we speak with special needs, your depression, your anger, stress, some they just need counseling after they've lost the parent. Schools are not having adequate, trained people to take for care of those maybe post-traumatic disorder, all those special needs that are out there experienced by those children, right? Okay, or rather what they have. So it was established that personal hygiene is another challenge to overcome. It relates to the lack of quality of food as well as healthy care. The study found that orphans are commonly vulnerable to contagious or communicable illnesses, diseases such as chickenpox, diarrhea, pink eye. Sadly, they rarely receive treatment on time. So deep down there in the rural areas, these children they face they easily get diseases like chickenpox, diarrhea, pink eye. Those ones that are really contagious from one person to another, because they don't have adequate health care. Some, even the diet they eat, it's not good enough to boost their immune system. So you only find those challenges that we have with orphans. They end up not coming to school. They only find that the child only comes twice, or maximum will be 3 times a week. Why? Because he's sick, cannot come to school. These are the challenges educators faced when they support those learners in their classrooms or in their school as a whole. Right. Okay, just the last slide of the findings. So the school management team also just indicated that there's not enough facilities in schools to provide healthy care treatment. This sometimes you only, in the deep rural areas, a school may be very far from a clinic, maybe a radius of 30 kilometers, 20 kilometers. So a teacher himself or a principal must drive his car because there's no ambulance or there's no vehicle to take that child to the doctor or to home. When you get to home, there's no one, for instance, or only these children. Maybe some of them, they are from child-headed household. Only find that the sister is also in the high school, far away from home. So you have to take the child straight to as a teacher. Remember, when you are a teacher, you have to sacrifice time for teaching and learning. So now we don't have enough facilities to provide health care for these orphans, because some of them, a school is the only safe haven for them to get all the needs, healthy food, psychological, social, even financial, So the study established that there's a poor communication between guardians. Like I've said, some they are already taken care of. They don't have foster parents. They are taken care by other children. Some they have elderly parents who are guardians who don't know anything about school homeworks, don't know anything about parents' evening. So all those negative impact, it's just all those challenges have a negative impact in supporting those learners in school. So the study discovered that orphans living with those guardians were not really particularly neglected, but they didn't appear to have better support, with help of assignments at home and everything, because some of them they get at home only find that the old lady or the old man or the old couple cannot help them to read and write. Because remember, in the rural areas, deep down there, most of the parents now there who have passed away. Others, they are working far away. The uncles away from the rural areas. So only the elderly parents who are there. So there's lack of support educationally. You can't have any feedback in terms of the learners reading, homework, and everything. So these are the challenges that happen there at grassroots, in the rural areas. Okay. So can we move on to recommendations? Page? Is there any question, or can I move on to
go for it?
recommendations?
Good.
All right.
I do have one question actually. You said something that really struck me, Gift. You were talking about the fact that these rural schools don't have the necessary resources. Are we talking about quintile 1 schools?
Yes, we're talking about quintile 1 schools.
Okay. So would you say that the funding for quintile 1 is not sufficient?
Yes, yeah, we know that we have got two types of funding. We've got Section 20 and Section 21, respectively. It depends on the nature of the school, how it is being funded in terms of the procurement. But however, in terms of special needs, like food, we've got the school nutrition, of which is not enough for these children because they arrive in the morning hungry. Because some they sleep with empty stomach. They only get food 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. In the morning, we've got mathematics class, of which you cannot focus without having a breakfast. You cannot study mathematics from an empty stomach. So schools, for instance, I remember one of my colleagues, what she did, she used to provide her own breakfast for these children because at least they must learn maths in the morning with food. So, for instance, the government does not cater for breakfast. What does it mean? It means that schools, they don't have even the funding itself, the food itself is not really addressing breakfast because some of those kids, they are very vulnerable in the way that they come to school. In the morning, they can only play and be happy at 10 o'clock when they have the meal. So we're talking about poor children here, children who come from very poor backgrounds, who are vulnerable, who don't have parents to make them lunchbox. So those, and we don't have homes for those children. We can only have foster care grant. Only that foster care grant, it feeds the whole family, the uncles who are unemployed. So there's so much situation that happens there at grassroots. That's why this research addresses, it has a closer look or outlook into the situation at grassroots, to explore those experiences. Okay, are you being answered?
So that might be one. Perfect, thank you. This might come up in your recommendations, but I'll ask it in any case.
All right.
Do you mention anything about restructuring the funding levels for the quintiles? Because obviously the quintile 1 schools are not getting enough. So did you in your recommendations, and maybe you're going to touch on this later, but have you touched on that or researched that in any way, restructuring the funding, the school funding model?
Yeah, I think you're quite right. I think the school funding model itself needs to be reviewed because some schools, like I've said, we need a kind of a redress approach where we look at the situation itself in terms of vulnerability, in terms of the community situation, like availability of NGOs, availability of jobs and everything. So we need to focus that, for instance, schools with some, like for instance, some schools in quintile 1, they are able to survive normally because of the area around the activities, the area. Cannot be highly economic activities like mine or industrial, but they are able to build resilience through gardens and everything. But I'll concur with you that we need to revise it so that we can really look at the needs. The policy itself or the model itself need to be revised so that we can able to look at the basic needs in terms of vulnerability, in terms of resiliency, in terms of addressing issues that come again, for instance. And remember, this study was conducted based on the HIV and AIDS. Today, we know that we've got COVID-19. So there's progression, there's changes. It's never static. Needs in the community are never static. They are dynamic. So time and again, about time that all the policies made in 2005, in 2010 need to be reviewed so that they can make sure that they are relevant to current needs of schools in the community. So if I were to say that we need to fund schools based on the community, not based on the quintile itself, but we have to look, district must to look at the needs, to top up maybe the budget based on the vulnerability, to have a special budget for orphans, for instance, in schools with high orphans, to have a budget special to take care of that. Because, for instance, there can be some orphans are not vulnerable, but where there's high vulnerability, we need more money. That's why I said we need a kind of a redressing approach that focusing on the gap between those who have and those who do not have. All right, okay. Are you being answered? Can I proceed?
Yeah.
Hello? All right, okay.
Yeah. Good.
Let's just proceed. Okay. So we have, so in the study, different recommendations at school level. Based on the findings of the study, it is recommended that schools incorporate HIV and AIDS education into their curriculum to reduce the stigma, to promote the awareness in classroom. The point of departure, for instance, it is never enough. We need to in schools need to make sure at school level that they incorporate. We know that the curriculum itself has the HIV and AIDS, but we need now to educate it now at school, because we can see that there's also a stigma that exists at school. But for us to be able to address the problem, like I've said earlier on, we need to do away with the stigma of HIV and AIDS, because now it has become the part of our lives. Whether you are, if you are not infected, but you are being affected, because it's in the system of human beings. We live with it in the system wherever we go, right? Number two, it is recommended that school management teams plans involve HIV and AIDS school policy, to invite NGOs, community members to contribute towards the capacity building, workshops, seminars for educators to cope with HIV and AIDS-related stress. So now at school level, SMT must also open doors to NGOs, to special institutions that they need to train NPOs, to train educators about the impact, how to cope, for instance, with HIV and AIDS related stress, right? And a third recommendation at school level, that educators must take upon themselves to familiarize themselves with HIV and AIDS programs, terminology, to increase their knowledge in supporting what HIV and AIDS often, to reduce the stigma against them. So even we only find during the study that educators, even themselves, they still have the stigma, unfamiliar with the terminology of orphans, vulnerable children. They don't know about different important, HIV and AIDS related, terminology. Themselves need to take a self-development initiative as it affects the area of their practice, to make sure that they also fight the stigma at a school level, right? The fourth recommendation is that schools need to make intervention to fight poverty and to provide HIV and AIDS orphans and vulnerable children in schools, like planting vegetable gardens, approaching local business to donate clothes, food, learners. So now we don't want to have a culture of entitlement. At school level, educators and SMT must take an initiative to build gardens now, so that they can build a resilience through those gardens, to provide the vulnerable children, right? To make sure that at the school level, there's also some intervention that are made by educators, not to always depend upon the government, not to always look upon NGOs or NPOs or any enterprises that exist outside the school, right? So now schools themselves, they can build resilience at a school level to fight against the vulnerability of those children, right? The last recommendation, schools need to add additional supply of the nutrition, like I said earlier on, to provide more food for orphans. No, so the fourth recommendation previously, from those guidance, from those donations, now schools can also have, like I said, not all learners who come from, not all the school learners are vulnerable. We're not having vulnerable like an approach that everyone, but you only identify those children, excuse me, who have needs. And then we can therefore achieve through linking with NGOs and other donors that comes from the community. So now this recommendation, it also primarily poses a challenge to educators that they have a mandate for themselves at school level to make sure that they develop, they develop the school by inviting people, by fundraising, by making guidance, could be any other project that can also help the children who are vulnerable at school level, right? Okay, at family level now, remember the issue of orphan and vulnerable children. It is a multidisciplinary problem because it takes different levels in the community. At family level, you know, families can play a very important role to improve the life of orphans. It is recommended that relatives, for instance, and family members, caregivers of HIV and AIDS orphans must get trained on raising orphans to respond to their special needs. Because some family members, like your cousin, brothers, grandmother, aunt, who are left with these children, they don't have knowledge on how to deal with them. That's why you only find that they are physically abused. They don't understand their problems, their reaction, they undergo bereavement. They have post-traumatic disorder. Some they even can't even focus at schoolwork. So now we need family level. Families need to make awareness. We need a family awareness that now the child now has lost parents. We cannot just behave as if life is normal, but there should be some intervention to understand and respond to those needs, special needs of orphans. Because if these children, if they are at home at family level, they are unable to be, to be assisted, it can be just a recurring problem even at school. So caregivers and guardians need to be empowered and to be supported to provide good home leadership, motivation, to encourage good behavior of orphans, value their correspondence with schools on matters pertaining education, HIV and AIDS orphan and vulnerable children. So now even those grandmothers, those aunts, those caregivers or guardians who are left, foster care parents, they also need to be educated, at family level that, now we have this, you must take responsibility now that you come to the meetings, you check the work, because we cannot just think that things can happen by default, expect them to do that, but we need to bring some kind of awareness so that they can correspond to the needs of those orphans and vulnerable children. Families need to familiarize with the psychological needs of orphans. They also need to knowledge how to provide support available from the nearest clinic, hospital, to ensure that they are fit for school and everything. So you only find that some parents, they are unable, guidance, they're unable to even to take the child for testing, medical, the situation, if the parents have been sick, and children, they need to test, they need to know about the situation, if they're infected or whatever. You only find that they discover very late, when the child can't get treatment and everything, but we need to train. For instance, if a child has been living with a mother or a father, then dies, goes to a grandmother, that grandmother must take responsibility, that aunt, for the health of the child. So those things in rural areas, this doesn't exist. There's no knowledge about that. Only for the children, they realize later that they've been infected. It's true for them to start treatment and everything. So those are the recommendations that we have to give at family levels, that those children, they need a holistic support, socially, psychologically, healthy, so all those intervention. Okay, at community level now. So this, like I've said, this is a discipline approach in the community. So the issue of the problem of orphans and vulnerable children is not a problem of schools or organizations or families, but even the community itself. It's a layer, of the human system where they belong, where they need to be educated, they need to be protected and supported. In response to support of orphans and recommendation we have made, so at the community level, where there's an ecological system that coexists, like I've said, that we live within different, people or spheres in the community. So community workers' intervention are needed to ensure that they provide adequate support. So this can happen through in the communities. We know that in communities there are community-based organizations. They have to belong to provide support at home. So these groups, they need to provide support for educators to cope with stress. Support groups consist of pastors, traditional leaders, counselors, leaders who provide knowledge and situation. So in the rural areas, we have traditional leadership. They must also be must be involved. Pastors from different religions, the leaders and different prominent people in the community, they need to be taken into consideration when there's a model or a program that needs to address the needs of orphans and vulnerable children in rural areas. All right, okay. So government level. So intergovernmental relations need to be strengthened by the Department of Education, KwaZulu-Natal, to ensure that the following recommendation. So relations between government departments need to be strengthened for this problem in particular in Umkhanyakude, for instance, to be solved. So it is recommended that health care is made easily available to schools, rural areas. For instance, mobile clinic must be able to go to schools for them to immunize. If there's chickenpox, they should need to check. School nurses, they need to be visit those schools quite often to test learners, to conduct, screening and everything in terms of their health care priorities, because they don't have time or means even to get to the clinic. Because some of the clinics, the radius is far from the rural areas, you can even hardly reach. So it is recommended that the department itself prioritize communities where there's a high prevalence of HIV and AIDS orphans. Just like I've said earlier on, there should be a specialized budget allocated for that to ensure that the schools receive funds to provide needs for educators and those learners who are affected and infected, right? So, for instance, only to find that some children, they are supposed to be on ARVs, but the stigma exists now that who's going to collect them for me? The distance between health care and these children who are infected is very huge. But if schools, they can have, healthcare workers, nurses who can be available close to them, this we can bridge the problem. We can also fight the infection of those HIV and AIDS orphan and vulnerable children in schools. So some of the issues here are very sensitive, but to understand, or for anyone just to know that they exist. But it is true that some children there at schools, among those children, some of them, they are very, very sick. And some, they come to school, they are very, very sick. And in the morning, they're sleepy, they can't play, they can't really have a normal life due to the presence of HIV and AIDS. Could be in their bodies, or it could be in their families, psychologically or socially. So those are the problems that we have identified with those orphans and vulnerable children. So it is recommended that the department nationally develop plans to integrate provision for support, social services in schools to ensure that educators cope with stress. There should be psychologists, for instance, social workers who are able to counsel educators. Those educators who are not trained enough to deal with the learners, for instance, who are stressed, who are experienced the pain of seeing a parent sick. But there should be also intervention in terms of bringing professionals in all the provinces to make sure that those areas are being affected. They have professionals who are coming to assist there. All right, okay. Yeah. So yeah, basically that's the end of the presentation. I can just take some questions. Yeah.
Wow, excellent, excellent. Gift, that was amazing. Thank you. There's a can you can you hear me? It's my
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
Can you hear me, Gift?
Yes, I can hear you very well. I can hear you very well.
Okay, so we have two people who've made some excellent comments. Gugu Yende says, I know that this is when you're talking about the fathers, and sometimes they don't eat at night and they come to school the next morning hungry. So that's a lived reality that these kids have. And I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Sandie Latoya Mapanga says, how I wish government could consider providing enough food for those children and also breakfast. She says she fully understands what you're saying. My question is, before I get to my question, you mentioned 4 levels of recommendations, and I love the fact that you have 4 levels: the teachers, community, government, and what is the 4th level?
It's a family, school, community,
family,
and the government. Yeah. So in the community, I forgot that also in the community. Right. Remember, there are also NGOs and NGOs that exist there in the community. So we can they also play a huge role in terms of addressing such problems. You know, may
right.
have
yes. Now, so my question is, sorry to cut you off, the Gift. My question is, of those 4 levels, which do you think is the most important to implement immediately to make a lasting impact? Because many times we live in a world where we're not going to be able to implement all at the same time. Would you recommend stressing and pushing for one of those to make to be recommended and implemented immediately? If so, which one and why?
I think what we need to recommend precisely, we have implement
immediately. If so, which one and why?
We have to respond.
I don't understand.
Based on the availability of resources. I think from the national government, we need to have policy that takes care of the needs for orphans and vulnerable children. Well, we do have the 2005 framework for policy for HIV and AIDS in vulnerable children, of which it was published by the DSD. By then, when Minister Zolaskoya was still a minister. But in terms of implementing, putting into the plans, to implement the plans into action, it was not done very well because we still think that we exist with those problems and we can only take care of them through school nutrition, school foster care grant. But only find that schools, like I've said earlier on, they don't have enough budget. For the budget to be allocated, we need policy. We need, for instance, at the parliament level, there should be laws that are provided to give programs, to give that program must have a budget, approved budget for those vulnerable children in schools. Remember, it cannot be done through only schools, but it should be a national government should have a special budget for that. For I were to answer you that we need to have national intervention first, then it can move through the government spheres until it comes to local government, because even local government must not, like the municipalities, must not just fold their arms and look at the problem. They should also consider special programs that take care of the orphans. Well, I understand. I've seen some of the municipalities. They do offer clothes and other needs, for orphans and vulnerable children, of which is good. But in terms of the policy nationally, there should be a program that said right now we are just targeting communities, or schools that need that special care. Intervention must be made nationally so that they can release money there. It can go through province, it can just go down to schools as far as the problem is affected those children. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So in other words, we people on the ground, we need to stress and we need to push government for those interventions. It's our responsibility, in other words.
Yeah. Through such, for instance, the only way for us to provide support or to provide evidence that this is a problem, things like you have to bring awareness, things like this research, because research exists to change or to improve the conditions of the community. So if you come with recommendations for instance, into Department of Education, then we motivate for policy influence. That's the only way for us at grassroots, because the minister does not know what happens in school, in classroom. The president is unaware. But professionals like me and you, educators, scholars, are the ones that have to identify the problem, then provide empirical evidence through research and say, this is what you are facing. Then we need to do, just like those in the laboratory, with pandemics, with diseases or whatever evidence required, they just go to laboratory. Then if there's a funding in that laboratory, then they can just develop a budget to fight that, to provide, for instance, vaccine, or to provide could be vaccine or treatment for that based on the findings. Same with us in social sciences or educational research. Our findings need to be taken now from the abstract into a concrete evidence that can be used to influence policy. Yeah.
That's excellent. So just a quick question, has your research and your colleagues that have done similar research, has this been passed on to provincial and national government?
Normally when I applied for the study, you are being questioned, how will your study benefit, the department? If you disseminate the knowledge, will it be able to? And then we take the findings into the department. So we don't know, maybe within the rankings or inside the department, do they put it in the shelf, or they see that there's a committee that reads that, of which you need to all to do a follow-up, that are these findings from social sciences, from our educational research, being useful to the government, into what extent, So it's another research, for instance, that needs to be conducted. Are these, because there are so many studies that talk about orphans, schools, problems in school, psychosocial issues, but they never go to an extent where they influence policy. When they're being adopted, they are considered so that they can influence how the government does budgeting, how does plans, for instance, for schools and everything. But I am very positive that they do matter, because as the body of knowledge grows, it becomes public knowledge. It becomes a norm. It becomes a problem. Yeah. It moves from being an issue, but it becomes a problem because we agree now. Someone who didn't know, for instance, about the issue of orphans and vulnerable children can just now agree that, okay, it's a problem. Through what? Through unpacking the problem and sharing the knowledge, But we hope that
Yeah.
our studies will make difference, as we keep on doing research. But it calls for us as academics and professionals to make our vote, to identify, to observe phenomena and do research and provide concrete evidence based on what has been happening at ground level.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so important for platforms like this Thesis Series 2020, because we are voicing these findings. So what you said, I agree spot on. These are the research that has to find its way back to national government and provincial government. So thank you for that. That for me is a confirmation that the Thesis Series is actually on the right track. So thank you for that. Gift, I just want to move on to the specifics, a few of the specifics of the actual study, and I'm going to ask you 3 or 4 questions because I know that you speak so well that I know you're going to be able to add them all together in your answer. The first question is what was the pupil teacher ratio of these schools in the classes that you've dealt with? Number 2, what type of interview questions did you ask the teachers? And number 3, can you explain attachment theory in a bit more detail to us, please? You mentioned it a little bit in your presentation, but if you could just explain a little bit more about attachment theory.
All right, okay. So let me just start with attachment theory. With the attachment theory, it's psychological. I borrowed because I'm in community development or community work. So I borrowed the theory from psychology. That when a child is born by the mother, we agree, all of us, that a child stays with the mother for 9 months. They develop a relationship. Then they communicate, they have a relationship. So the child becomes naturally attached to a mother, sometimes to a father, So, and then when the child is born, the attachment carry on. But when the mother passes away or the father passes away as a primary caregiver, then the child becomes detached from the mother. What happens when the life of the child becomes disturbed? So attachment theory is the theory that says, I look upon my mother. My mother is a source of inspiration, source of guidance, love, care, and support. In this study, this theory relates because educators, when they assume the role of being parents to a child, then they reconnect to the child through the attachment. You can not only just be attached to a mother, but they become attached to their second caregiver now. So the educator become a primary caregiver. That's an assumption. So they can able to look upon the father right now. For instance, myself as a male educator, for instance, I'm not a mother, for instance. Typically, primary school teacher would be a mother. But, for me,
Oh man, we seem to have lost Gift there. I hope he. Oh man, I hope he. I hope he comes back soon. But while we wait for Gift, I see a number of people have commented. Thank you, Zandile. Zandile says, "Thank you, Gift. This is a motivation for me." Sipon Kosi says, "Belgrade's finest." So I'm glad to hear that there's a couple of people that are recognizing Gift. That's fantastic. Just a quick comment. If you have a question, please ask your questions in the comment section on Facebook, and we will definitely pose those questions to Gift. Zandile, it sounds as if you are about to perhaps undertake a master's project or honors project. If you are, please, this is a wonderful platform to ask those types of questions. And as soon as we get Gift back, I do want to ask him a question about encouraging us about encouraging us for our studies, for studying, whether it's a teaching degree, a BA degree, a diploma, whatever it is, a certificate, whatever it is. I'm sure he can encourage us with something regarding our studies. Sorry, Gift, we lost you there for a second. Are you still with us?
Yes, hello. Hello.
Great stuff. No. So I was just saying that Zandile just mentioned now that you are great motivation, and Sipho Nkosi, he probably knows you. He says recognize you, so I'm sure you definitely.
He's my school teacher. Sipho Nkosi is my high school
look at
teacher.
that! That's amazing.
I didn't know he's watching. I mean, like,
great stuff. So sorry, Gift, you were saying we have about 20 minutes left, and so I'll give you a few minutes to answer that question, just to finalize your thoughts on attachment theory, and then I've got 2 more questions for you after that.
Okay. So So I don't know what happened with these devices. I was just cut off. With the attachment theory, well, I'm not a psychologist, but we just believe that when we use this theory, learners are able to connect now with new primary. Now a teacher plays a role of being a primary caregiver for a child, for that child who has lost parents. So through that way, the child is able to gain what? Normalcy, or to build resilience. Remember, in order to build resilience, you should first identify vulnerability, right? Before you can build resilience, you must identify vulnerability. Number 2, you must therefore adapt situation now. Now it's a new normal, right? Then it's where you can now provide now resources, mitigate based on that situation. Firstly, what do? Identify vulnerability. And then number 2, you also adapt. You adapt now. It should be an adaptive approach to know that this is a new normal. And thereafter, able now to provide resources based on that. So attachment theory, it helps us to understand that although I am not a father, biological father of a child, I'm a teacher. But being there, giving love, support, and care, it helps the child to regain normalcy. For instance, in my own class, in a school, for instance, in the school, there was a child from grade 5. She had lost, she never met the father. But when she looked at me, the way I smiled to her, the way my articulation to her, my relationship, even now, she still takes me as a father because she developed that kind of love and support. So I play a role of being a father even today. In the child is normal. She's no longer a child now. She's now a fully grown adult. But because of the love and support, I was able to reconnect. So what we need to do is that as human beings, we operate within the dimensions of structures, of relationships. We can then assume a role to make sure that you bridge the existing gap. It doesn't have to be a biological father. As a professional, you can play a role of love, support, and pastoral care. This is how we integrate attachment theory inside the study. Yeah. And then the other question about the teacher-learner ratio.
Yeah.
For instance, in my class, or the school where I was, or in the other schools where I make, there are normally overcrowded schools. Schools, they lack infrastructure. It's not a problem for another day. You only find that there is a ratio of 1 to 65 in average. One educator.
What?
Yes, 1 to 65. It depends. For instance, it will be 1.3 learners in school. So 1.3 learners in school, with the number of 20 teachers. You can see now. It's all those things. depends. But there are a lot of dynamics that we can talk about in terms of PPN numbers changing and everything. But in my school, it was 1 to 50. But the minimum schools in those areas could be, if a school has 40 kids in primary school, that school is not really overcrowded school. And those children, they can't even practice, different activities in classroom. They need to go out and do it on the grounds and everything, because the ratio is quite high due to there are other number of factors. Lack of infrastructure is one of them. That the government is still trying to make sure that there is adequate funding to take care to build those schools, because there are so many schools that are having a backlog in terms of infrastructure.
Yeah, great stuff. So I've got. Yeah. Sorry. Oh yes, the last question that I asked you previously was the interview questions to teachers. I almost forgot about that. Tell us.
What we had two types of data collection essentially. The first one, they were just interviews that were asked to a school management team. Those interviews, they were based on the management side of the schools. Excuse me. Of which the question about the resources, budget, policy, right? So those we can say they are more much of planning type of strategic questions that we ask management. But then we have also focus groups, interviews or questions that we ask, excuse me, the number of 6 to 10 educators in groups. Those were just unstructured questions based on the themes or different types of aspect from the literature or from the research questions that we formulated. So those questions, they're able to bring more themes, based on on the progression of the discussions. Is they're able to they were not really structured, although they were just questions, but the data came along as they just spoke. What the reason for them not to, because we wanted them to be freely express themselves, right? We didn't. There was no flexibility, yeah. So there were two-folded type of question. The first one, it was based on the research, on the SMT, and the other one, it was based on the class educators.
Okay, excellent. That's helpful. Okay, I've got 3 last questions. Okay, and we're already 1 hour and 18 minutes in, so we're doing well for time. I'm sure you've heard of CSE, this comprehensive sexual, what is it called? This new curriculum that has been touted about by government in the last few months. HIV/AIDS is obviously a
advocates for gender neutrality. All right, okay.
That's right. So HIV/AIDS is obviously a massive problem in South Africa, and I was wondering what are your thoughts on implementing CSE, considering HIV/AIDS is such an issue. It is an issue in South Africa. By the way, when we spoke last time, you mentioned something very, very interesting to me regarding the difference between HIV/AIDS and COVID-19. Maybe you can touch on that in your answer as well.
Talk about it's called what? Comprehensive sexual education, eh?
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, but I think a lot, like I said earlier on in my presentation, education phenomena itself is progressive in nature. It's not relative, so it changes now and again. So with this approach, we cannot run away from the pre-existing or pre-recurring trends in the community, sexual trends, for instance. So the implementation or the proposed implementation of the CSC, it comes from the prevalent, the existing. For instance, now, 10 years back, if you want to address a child in terms of sexuality, it's not the same right now. Eh? Now, for instance, the way they relate to sexuality is not the same like in 1994 or in 2004. or in 2010. So it's very good that, because now we want to solve the problem that are immediate, are current, we need to use relevant now policies, relevant trends or patterns of thinking to solve the problem. Myself, I think we have to, if a policy comes in, remember that policy, it has two dimensions, good and the bad. There's always a bad and the good, but you have to do a CB, a cost benefit analysis, CBA, to see which one is good. But for me, I think we just have to give it a chance to see that, because right now you can just stand in class and talk about a woman and a man in terms of sexuality, HIV, AIDS, and everything, and then it makes sense and become relevant. But now these children are children who live in 2020. There's a lot of sexual rights, sexual orientations that educators must be relevant, because now we're not saving our own interest as educators, as traditional people, but now we're dealing with young people who now live in a very recent or modern way. Education and the curriculum must be always relevant to the needs of the existing recipients of which they are learners, right? We need to be educators to understand what's happening out there, so that we're able to educate our children. The CSC, I think, is relevant because we cannot run away from it, because the world, it's like I said, it's progressive, it changes, it's dynamic. We need to have immediate, relevant solutions for whatever pre-existing problems in terms of epidemics and everything. I was reminded of one of the students back in the university when he was explaining about how gender differences, sexual rights, and gay, lesbian kind of nature. That, you know, to provide solution like prevention for HIV and AIDS, you have to understand now what has changed. And because this has changed, this is new. Now, if there's a new trend, there will be new problems. We need new solutions that will help people to be relevant. You cannot use the old solution to change the situation that is new. That's why we need, as educators, we need to educate ourselves, as academics, as policymakers, as politicians, for even politicians themselves. They have to influence policy based on relevant knowledge. That's why you always want fees must fall is pushed by politicians. The LGBTQ plus, also gender-based violence, politicians and academics. So we need to understand that time changes. Denying the situation cannot help. But what it will do, it will perpetuate the HIV and AIDS. It will perpetuate gender-based violence, because even the CSE, it is a dimension where, for instance, people are like things like corrective rape, for instance. People are being raped. We need to educate our kids that corrective rape is not good, because in some areas they think it's correct, and then it perpetuates what gender-based violence. So all those things, there is an ecology, there's the connection, the connectivity among the phenomena the whole way. So that's why it's important for us to address that in terms of policy. I think the comprehensive sexual education, some they can just introduce it as trying to, maybe we are brainwashing our children. These children, they live in the internet. These children, they are ahead of us as adults. They know everything. But for them, having a policy that will safeguard them, that even if you choose to live this way, but know that this is dangerous, this is not dangerous. Try to live right, protect yourself, excuse me, ensure that there's everything that you do based on sustainability, and ensure that everything you do is done correctly. So that policy will educate us, safeguard how we should now adapt to change. You know.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, my second last question for tonight is, and I'll give you just 2 minutes to touch on this. What are your thoughts on reopening schools? You know, teachers have been schools have been on holiday for 3 weeks now. I think almost 3 weeks. What are your thoughts on that? If you can just touch on that 2 to 3 minutes.
You know, fortunately, you know, with disaster, this disaster, COVID-19 is a national disaster. You know, disaster, like I've said, it needs, you have to, in order to respond to disaster, you must check vulnerability. Yeah? Then after vulnerability, there should be what you adapt to it, you mitigate, and then you can build resilience. You know, disaster is like war. It's a matter of life and death. That's why it is very important that we have to see now, going to school or being safe, being vulnerable or to build resilience. I think that there hasn't been an adequate plan from the government side. That's why we're busy in and out of schools on how to build resilience, how to cope, how to go to school now, how to bring normalcy now with our mask, with our social distancing, with a class that is 1:50. Remember, with our bus, with our school transport, one bus with 15 kids, or one truck, or whatever mode of transport kids. So there shouldn't be a plan. There wasn't a proper planning. So those things we have to study each and every aspect, from transport, from social distancing, from provision of PPE, from availability of infrastructure. I think there hasn't been enough readiness. We're not ready enough to adapt to that, so we can build resilience and provide and converge and release all the cycle of adaptation in terms of resilience. So we need to ask ourselves, are we ready? You know, I understand that there are also pushing factors, you know, that people should go to school and everything. But I take COVID-19 like a war, like it's my personal thing. Will you dive bullets to school? Will you, if you see explosion, will you go to school? COVID-19 is very serious, you know. I think we became very resilient. We have like we now resilient. You can't just be resilient. There should be processes to be taken. Are you ready? Do you have enough capacity to be resilient? There was not enough capacity to be resilient to go back to schools. That's why I say the issue is that's why we've got teachers who are being affected. We've got learners who are being affected. Schools are being closed. There is no adequate mitigation. We may have PPEs, but we haven't adapted into the new normal. To build resilience, you have to undergo all those stages towards resilience. You can't just jump from disaster, then resilience. There should be some steps. You adapt, you converge, you release. You know, all those things that should be happening. But I think it was too soon. I concur with Professor Jansen that academic year was supposed to be suspended. I know it was not just, it sounded like a very myopic idea or premature idea, but in terms of reality, we're supposed to take it as a war and sit down at least for some time and how to provide. I know there are a lot of issues pushing it, of which I cannot mention them here, but the gist is that there is no proper teaching and learning in this nature. We're just doing it for the sake of doing it, you know. We're just doing it. In Sifiso, they say, we're just doing it for it. There's no effective teaching and learning. We have not have enough capacity to adapt into the new normal. Because after a disaster, it is in theory, it is written that there should be the capacity to adapt, resources, psychologically, socially, building resilience. All those aspects we just ignored. That we just go back to school. That's why unions said no, we can't. We're not ready, and parents said we're not ready. If a parent is not happy for the child to go to school, psychological that parent is not going to cooperate with the teacher. You know. So those aspects. Well, it's a new thing. I don't blame anyone, but you have to learn, and you have to learn that next time if there is a war or whatever thing, we have to learn how to adapt before we just can act on resilience.
I love that those two terms that you used, adaptability and resilience. That's something that that I think we can take out as nuggets of truth from this. My last question for you, Gift, this evening. Zandile Mponchane thanked you a bit earlier, and she said this is motivation for you. And I'm not sure if that motivation is in terms of her being a teacher in an area where there's a high level of HIV/AIDS, or if it's motivation for her perhaps being a student, a future postgrad student. But because our thesis series is based on postgrad studies, could you give us some encouragement? What do you think is the importance of postgrad studies and an encouragement, a short encouragement for us to pursue postgrad studies?
Professor Ntombela, she was my co-supervisor before, was my professor, in the field of study. Used to say that postgraduate, it's luxury, because sometimes they don't need it. but research itself, number one, it changes the way people think. Because now you don't use emotions, you use your personal principles, your ideology, but you rely on empirical evidence to make solutions or to engage with different aspects in life. So I think it's good for people to pursue, especially in our areas, in our community. We need to be educated into somethingness, because there are some degrees or there are some education that does not bring relevance or improve our lives. But when you just carry on with the field of study, do your postgraduate, but when you do it, make sure that you choose subjects or research topics that are able to go back to your own community where there are problems to improve. I think we have to do research postgraduate, could be honors, masters, or PhD, based on improving the problems that exist in the community. So research is here to improve. Well, it can maybe a philosophy where you are expanding on the theory, you are bridging the gap that exists in the body of knowledge. But the most important thing, the research must be relevant to improve policy, practice, and also make sure that it brings the economic development in rural areas. People should do research, because research, it opens the eyes of politicians, policymakers, even for people in the community, that it's a way of empowering yourself and then you're empowering others.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
No, brilliant.
It's worth it, because you're able to open new frontiers, to shift frontiers, to open curtains for things that we not know before. So that people can have a look and see, okay, awareness, there's a problem that exists, because it started as an assumption, then you test it, then you see it exists, it becomes a bigger picture. Then everyone is able to know that, okay, now gender-based violence emanates from this. It's true, it's proven. Then they're able to say, oh, okay, let's just avoid this. They find ways on how to live. It improves your life and others at large.
Yeah, no, that's true. Excellent, excellent. Gift, I want to thank you for being our first presenter on the thesis series. I'm definitely grateful for you for your time, and I think it was fantastic. It was very enlightening. I really enjoyed the way that you spoke academically. So from my side and from Teach to Reach, thank you very much. I just want to this Zandile, just a quick mention. Zandile just wrote in our comment stream. She's from the Umkhanyakude District, and she's intending to do masters in 2021. So I'm not sure if you do know Zandile Gift, but maybe it'll be nice to meet up and maybe just encourage her.
Are the people who live that side, but but it's fine. Hopefully she knows me. Hopefully, because I see a lot of people here that they will be watching, of which even those who will be coming after me. I mean, we are very happy that we have this platform where we were able to share the research. Although we have some technical problems and everything, we live in the rural area where there's no uncapped power. But we hope one day that some new research that will provide technological advancements in rural areas, Thank you very much, Mr. Shetty.
Yeah.
For,
you know, and I just
yeah.
No, you're most welcome. And just a quick mention on that, you know, the Teach to Reach's goal is to really reach areas that need it the most. And so issues of technology, barriers of technology, of data, that shouldn't be a problem. You know, so from our side, I want to make a public declaration, if I can. You know, we really want to make sure that we reach those areas that need it most. And if anybody is listening and who might listen in the future, if you want to get in contact with Teach to Reach, and if you want to help us on the ground, please do so. You know, our email address, make contact with us. All right, I think that's it, Gift. Thank you very much once again. Thank you to everybody who watched and who listened intently. I wish you all a fantastic weekend. And to all the teachers who will be going back to school soon, keep safe. And yeah, have a fantastic evening. Thanks, everybody. Cheers, Gift. Thanks so much.
Right.